In your maps, did you include any of the cell face data?
Can I explain why I made that decision?
This is important because that places Karen's vehicle in very particular locations.
Do you see what appears to be the cell tower that is associated with that ID number?
Where's he going
Yes.
with this?
Okay.
When he said I thought it was something completely different. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Buckle Up, It's the Law. Today we're going to be covering part 3 of Lieutenant Brian Tully's testimony on cross-examination by none other than Alan Jackson in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Karen Reed. Let's go!
You testified to, specifically the Verizon call records that you testified about during your training. The 200 plus hours of training that you've had, you've learned how to read Verizon records to determine cell towers that are used in your investigation, correct?
Yes.
You were also taught how to read Verizon call records to determine the sector or the side that a cell tower is pinging, for lack of a better word, called a cell face, correct?
Yes.
All right. May I approach? No?
Yes.
Thank you.
Shout out to the trial channel, BT Dubs.
Now, one of the documents that you rely on pretty heavily is ultimately it's a call record that gives you certain information provided by whoever the carrier is, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, whoever, right?
Yes.
Do you recognize the document that's in front of you or the portion of the call record that's in front of you?
It appears to be a portion from the call detail records we referenced earlier.
Okay. My questions about this are relatively simple. There is a sector number that provides information that describes the directionality, if you will, of the target phone number, which part of the cell tower that target phone number or that target device was facing, correct?
Yes.
In your maps, did you include any of the cell face data about which portion of the cell tower was pinging vis-a-vis the phone that was being tracked?
No. Can I explain why I made that decision?
Please do.
When the trouble with depicting and making exhibits when relative to cell phone records is you don't want to make the map too complicated. So as I describe it to the jury, I want to make sure that the record is clear. Now, I don't typically will use the sector as part of my maps. I would argue that it gives greater deference to the defendant because the phone could be anywhere within a 360-degree area of the antenna opposed to a narrower 120-degree area around that antenna. So for the purposes of making a clear depiction, I typically will not use sector unless it's absolutely important to show that a handset was in a specific location.
And so you did not include the sector information on the maps that you provided, both to Mr. Lally and that you showed to the jurors and provided us, correct?
Yes, as relative to the CSLI ones, yes.
So in point of fact, according to the map at least, wherever that little triangle is, that red triangle that you use to denote the cell tower or the antenna, the responsive phone, the device, could be anywhere on a 360-degree azimuth from that antenna, correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you about the one map that was related to 5:20 a.m. to 5:37 a.m. You remember that?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. There were several maps shown. Got a copy. Can I approach?
Yes.
That's a copy of a page of an exhibit that's already been marked and entered into evidence. You recognize that?
Yes.
And that's a copy of your map that you did dealing with ENBID 57021, correct?
Yes.
And the time frame was 5:20 a.m. to 5:37 a.m. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And by the way, do you know what ENBID stands for?
No, that's why the legend key is helpful. Its node is the NB, but I'm unsure on the E.
Evolved Node B Identifier, right?
Is that a question? Yeah. That's possible, yes.
It is my question.
Okay.
Refresh your recollection, that's what it means?
I'd have to look at the key again, but that sounds right.
So an evolved, if that's what it stands for, an evolved node B identifier, and then a series of numbers after that, is simply sort of the proper name for a particular tower.
Correct.
No two towers have the same E and B ID, correct?
Correct.
Okay. With regard to, and I'm just going to call it ID 57021, do you see what appears to be, on your map, what appears to be the cell tower that is associated with that ID number, 57021?
Where is he going
Yes.
with this?
Okay. And there's one address that's denoted on your map, correct? Is that 34 Fairview?
No, there's multiple.
Okay, what are the other addresses that you noted on your map?
1 Meadows Ave and Waterfall Bar and Grill.
Okay. May I approach you on that?
Yes.
If I could hand you another map, does that appear to be a Google map?
Yes.
Does that generally track the map that you created, the darker map that you created? Meaning it's the same basic scale?
It is not the same scale.
How much different is that scale?
The one you handed me is a zoomed in version of the map I created.
Okay. Do you recognize it as being a true and accurate reflection of a Google map that's just zoomed in a little bit on the same basic area?
As you just described, it appears to be Google Map
Okay.
creation.
And you see two addresses that are denoted on that Google map?
Yes.
What are those two addresses?
34 Fairview Road and 12 Country Lane.
And as you look at that Google map with both of those, given your experience with both of those addresses, do those appear to be denoted accurately on that Google map?
It does. I would note that you can't see the roads really on this map that you handed me.
Understood. I'm not going to ask you a question about
It's
the
kind
roads.
of it's a white blur, so it.
But does it look like that's where 34 Fairview is and that's where 12 Country Lane is?
But yeah.
Okay. Then I'm going to ask you for the third item that's denoted on the map, and that is the cell tower 57021. Do you see that denoted on the map?
Yes.
Does that appear to be generally accurate in terms of the spatial location of where that cell tower is?
Yes.
Move for the admission of that item, that document.
Objection.
What? Why? Why are you objecting? What's the objection?
Taking a look at that exhibit, would you agree that the cell tower 57021 is significantly closer to what's denoted as 12 Country Lane, the McCabe residence, physically as a crow flies, than it is to 34 Fairview?
I would not characterize it as significant.
How would you characterize it?
That it is closer.
Okay. May I publish, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, so it's in evidence.
Take a look at the upper
Okay,
portion,
the
upper
objection
right
was
portion of the
overruled.
map that I just highlighted. What does that denote?
The
Otherwise, the jury would never be able to see it.
tower that we previously mentioned, 57021.
Okay. And then there's a line just a straight line from that cell tower down to this location. What is that location?
It's denoted on this exhibit as 34 Fairview Road.
Okay. And do you see a legend indicating scale? How far that is?
I see numbers and miles written on there.
Does that appear to be reflective of given your understanding and your experience with this location or these locations, does that appear to be a relatively accurate delineation of the distance between the cell tower and that location, and that address?
I don't know the distance between the cell tower and the address off the top of my head.
Would you agree that it's around 2 miles?
It's roughly 2 miles.
Okay. Then I'm going to ask you to take a look at the same proximity, the cell tower on the top of the screen, and then the address at 12 Country Lane. Do you see those two items denoted on the map?
Yes.
And do you see the approximate distance between those two items?
See it on the map?
All right. And does it appear to you that the distance from 12 Country Lane looks like it's less than half the distance to 34 Fairview?
I wouldn't characterize it as it appears to be less than half.
How would you characterize it?
My understanding of that area, I would say it's at least a mile between those two locations as the crow flies.
Okay, meaning between the cell tower and 12 Country Lane,
Yeah,
right? And it indicates approximately a mile, correct?
it does indicate that.
Okay. And the other location indicates approximately 2.4 miles, right?
It does indicate that.
All right. So would you agree that a mile is less than half of 2.4 miles?
I would agree a mile is less than half than 2.4.
Thank you. We can take that.
He's having so much trouble agreeing with Jackson. It's
You also
staggering.
noted that there were two cell towers much closer to 34. There are two cell towers much closer to 34 Fairview than the 57021, correct?
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, you already noted that for the jurors that say at 6 a.m. or 6:05 a.m. and thereafter, when it's clear that Ms. Reed was at 34 Fairview, she found the body of John O'Keefe, that her phone was relaying to those two towers variously, bouncing back and forth, correct?
Yes.
Those two towers are 57171, correct? Sorry, I don't mean to test your memory like that. I can. May I approach?
Yes.
I'm just going to give you that packet, Lieutenant. Like I said, it's not a memory test. If that helps refresh your recollection of the name of the two towers closest to 34 Fairview. Do you have that in mind?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the two towers closest to 34 Fairview are 57171, correct?
Yes.
And 57286, is that right?
Yes.
And both of those towers picked up Miss Reed's signal at 12:33 a.m. and again after 6:03 a.m., correct?
You asked me about 12:33, so if it's okay, I'm going to refer back in the exhibit.
Of course.
And that is correct. It hit the 57171.
And then after 6 a.m., it was also picking up, bouncing, I think you said bouncing back and forth between 57171 and 57286.
Yes.
Both of those towers were picking her up.
Yes.
Importantly, though, between 5:20 and 5:37 a.m., neither of those two towers ever picked up her phone or any signal from her phone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So based on those facts, it's far more likely that Karen Reed was actually at Jennifer McCabe's and on her way to Jennifer McCabe's at and around 5 a.m. than going to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
But it's what? Why?
I just want to touch very
Basis.
briefly on the ranging data, the RTT.
I mean, the
records.
jury heard it. That's enough.
What does RTT stand for?
Depends on who you ask from Verizon, either range to tower or round trip time.
Have you ever heard real-time tool?
I have.
Okay, so that's the RTT has several acronyms, but real-time tool is one of them, correct?
Yes.
The RTT data is what you earlier described as a ranging data or access distance, correct?
I didn't use the term access distance. I know that Verizon may, but I said ranging.
So it's just in common vernacular, it's the distance from the tower or from the antenna to where the signal is going, correct?
Yes.
All right. May I approach one more time?
Yes.
Could you please review that and tell me if you recognize what's depicted on that document?
I recognize it to be one of the entries from the RTT report for the account we're talking about.
I'm sorry. And it's around 5:18 in the morning, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you utilize this report or portions of this report, including this entry, to come up with your data, especially as it relates to ranging data, correct?
Yes.
Do you see the column on that document called pros duration sex, right? Procedure duration sex.
I do.
What does that mean?
That is the amount of time in which this communication occurred.
Okay. Am I correct in understanding that the length of time for the RTT event is calculated in seconds, correct?
It is.
All right. Do you see the row in the exhibit that indicates the time 5:18?
When he said sex, I thought it was something completely different. Just for the record, it's SECS. You pervs.
a.m.
Yes.
And do you see a column that's labeled procedure start time?
Yes.
And right next to it, there's a procedure end time, correct?
Yes.
Are those the start times and the end times that you earlier testified to in front of the jury about the event in question at 5:18 a.m. or thereabouts, the start of the interaction or the communication with the device and the end of the communication with the device?
Yes.
When you say communication with the device, what does that mean? What are you referring to? A phone call, a text, something?
We don't know. As I testified to, the ranging reports will create entries even unbeknownst to the user. So I have no information with this record before me about what the user was or was not doing with the phone.
But your testimony is that those two arcs that we saw, those respective arcs that we saw, your testimony is that this RTT data, in your view, establishes that she was on the device, not she, but the device was on the first arc at the start time, and it was on the second arc at the end time.
I'm going off the ranging that they give me.
And
then you created those two
This
arcs.
is important because that places Karen's vehicle in very particular locations. So if she allegedly had hit, let's say, John O'Keefe before she left 34 Fairview early on, when people were still inside having a party, I mean, you really want to tell me that 15 people have left and nobody noticed the body just strewn about? It was just covered with snow so quickly, nobody noticed. Please.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand what the definition of those two arcs are in your map.
The definition comes from the first distance and last distance, which is denoted on this exhibit you have in front of me here.
Okay, and the first distance is what?
0.82 miles.
Okay, and the second distance is, from memory, I think it's 0.97?
Correct.
All right. That's a difference of what? We do the math.
1.5 miles.
0.15.
0.15 miles, correct?
Excuse me, yes.
Okay. And do you see the procedural duration column indicated on that document?
I do.
Okay. And the procedure duration column indicates 0, doesn't it?
Yes.
However, if we look very closely at the start time and the end time, they're not actually the same times, are they?
Correct.
There's a difference in those two times. Can you tell the jurors what that difference is?
It is 4 thousandths of a second.
0.004 seconds, correct?
Yes.
And you testified that you believe that the start and end distances for the RTT event in question indicate two different locations for that device. In other words, the start time, it was on the first arc. The end time, it was on the second arc. You don't know where on the arc, but somewhere on those two arcs.
Using the ranging data, I created a map,
I
and
understand.
that's what I did.
Okay. And so the device would have moved from the first arc to the second arc, correct?
Yes.
Right. You're familiar with, obviously, the formula to determine speed using distance and time, correct?
Yes.
All right. Can you calculate for us the speed that the device would have traveled to go from the first arc to the second arc over a distance of 0.15 miles in 4 thousandths of a second?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
That's a serious question.
Let me see if I can help.
I don't think he'll be able to do that.
Distance. Sorry,
knows?
speed is calculated as distance divided by time, right?
Yes.
Oh my God. Are we going to be doing math?
If you divide 0.15 miles by 4 thousandths of a second, you come up with 37.5 miles per second. Would you agree?
Objection.
Sustained.
Why? You're just doing basic numbers. You're doing basic math. Is Alan Jackson going to be able to get all of this in without Lally interrupting him and corrupt Bev agreeing with Lally? You're going to have to find out in the finale of Tully Part 4. Bye, everybody.